Welcome to Wednesday Wanderings. My name is Mark Long, rector of the parish of St Andrew in Newlands, Cape Town. Today I'm in our Garden of Remembrance, and the cross in the garden is just behind me over my shoulder. As part of our Lent course this year, we are focusing on the death and resurrection of Jesus, what it meant back then, what it means for us now, and working through aspects of Rowan Williams' wonderful book, God With Us. Our first session has been on the cross, and so it's one of the things I'm wondering about at the moment. The cross back in Jesus' time was really a source of, or an instrument of torture. It was an instrument of torture that the Roman Empire used to keep control, and very specifically control on the borders of the empire, where things obviously would run a little ragged. And so for many of the people in Jesus' time, to see a cross, it would normally have a body on it. It would be alongside the road as you entered a village or a town. There would probably be more than one, even many if there had been some major riot that had happened. It was a form of control. It was a form of ensuring that the people you had conquered remained oppressed under your power. And so for many of the Jewish community around Jesus and his ministry, and particularly for the early church as it began to grow and develop after Jesus' death and resurrection, a cross would certainly have not been a comforting picture or image to have to deal with. And you wouldn't have found it naturally in places of worship. The cross would be something people would expect to find next to the road as you entered a town or a city or a village. And particularly if there had been some rioting or some form of revolt, there would be many crosses with bodies just hanging on them, slowly rotting away. So the cross in Jesus' time and for the early Christian community was not the kind of image of, or didn't bring the kind of comfort that it does to you and I in terms of our faith. But of course, over time, all that the cross represented back then has been turned around as we've actually engaged with it, and as the early church began to engage with it. Central to so much of what's in the New Testament is the image of the cross. And of course, it's through Jesus' death and resurrection, the cross, its meaning was transformed and changed. And so from having been a sign of oppressive violence, it actually became very powerfully, as Rowan Williams points out, a sign of love, a sign of freedom, a sign of forgiveness. And for many of us, that is probably the meaning that comes to mind as we see the cross. And it is a meaning that I think certainly brings me, and I'm sure many of you, brings you a deep sense of comfort. But it's helpful to remember that its origins were not what we experience it to be, and that God was willing to take on the worst of our humanity in dying on that cross, in the violence that went with his arrest and trial, and the beatings that he received before he was in fact crucified. Wonderful sense that God has taken this violent image, enfolded it, embraced it, and transformed it into something that for many of us in our Christian faith brings us hope and brings us to a place where we can hold where we find ourselves quite resilient in the face of suffering, be it our own or the sufferings of others. A wonderful sense that out of the huge pain and grief of the cross, that there is this gift of joy and a real hope of renewal and restoration. So I leave those thoughts with you for reflection this week, and perhaps just with the question, what is your image of the cross? What does the cross mean to you?